welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. General Honta Inta has been sworn in as the transitional president of Guinea-Bissau just a day after army officers announced they had ousted President Umaro Sissoco Embalo in a military coup. The European Union has called for a swift return to constitutional order in Guinea-Bissau and the resumption of the interrupted electoral process following a military coup yesterday. The European Union Parliament has approved a resolution that calls for an end to the civil war in Sudan, but without any mention of the United Arab Emirates' alleged role in the conflict. Tunisia has freed prominent lawyer Sonia Dahmani after 18 months in prison for criticizing President Kais Saied, a case that sparked local protests and international condemnation. Dahmani said she hopes her release will open the door for dozens of other detained critics, while Saied continues to deny any crackdown on dissent. Guinea-Bissau's military has now sworn in Major General Horta Inta as transitional president after toppling the civilian government. Kenya's High Court has ruled that parts of the 2012 Seed and Plant Varieties Act were unconstitutional, securing small-scale farmers' rights to share and save local seeds without facing fines or jail. The decision, celebrated by farmers, ends penalties that unfairly targeted smallholders while favoring commercial seed producers. US President Donald Trump has announced that National Guard trooper Sarah Backstorm has died after a shooting near the White House. He has said that the second soldier remains in critical condition and is fighting for his life. US President Donald Trump has announced a sweeping set of immigration proposals. He vows to permanently pause immigration from all third world countries and launch what he described as a reverse migration to restore order in the United States. Now we start with Guinea-Bissau. General Horta Inta has been sworn in as the transitional president of Guinea-Bissau just one day after army officers announced that they had ousted President Umaro Sissoco Embalo in a military coup. Inta, who was previously the chief of the staff of the country's army, said evidence was sufficient to justify the military operation. The African Union has condemned the coup and called for the immediate release of Embalo and all detained officials. The coup occurred just a day before provisional results from the presidential election that were expected to be announced. While the capital Bissau remains quiet, soldiers are patrolling the streets and many residents are staying indoors. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how dangerous is it that this coup occurs very often in Guinea-Bissau, and now once again, it has occurred, and now a new leader has been sworn in?
It's an important question that you ask, and I don't think anyone can answer it with certitude. Since gaining independence from Portugal in 1973, 52 years ago, Guinea-Bissau has spent more years under army's rule than under democracy. And sometimes, as it happened in the last president's term, a former military dictator has become a democrat. President Omaro's re-election likelihood was to be the first time that a Guinea-Bissau president was to be re-elected democratically. So there was a lot of speculation and excitement about it, except that a new contender emerged who was able to pull substantial number of voters to his side, making the contest pretty close. Uh, as the votes were being counted and were to be declared yesterday, uh, a day before, army decided to intervene, and the transitional authority has mentioned the possibility of fraud in the election, and they have claimed to have deposed the president, Umaru, and appointed a president of their own, which is what seemed to have happened. This was against the warnings by the European and other observers group of the elections, as well as African Union, ECOWAS, and West Asian Elders Forum. I should add here that the African Union has a long-standing policy not to recognize any military regime. At the same time, I suppose the coup plotters in Guinea-Bissau would have taken to heart three coups in the last 4 or 5 years that has taken place in that region. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger all have had military coups, and despite various sanctions by AU and African Union and ECOWAS, nothing much seemed to have happened, and these regimes have survived.
So
they might be able to become the fourth country to do so, apparently. That's what they hope. And but here I should add that Guinea-Bissau is one of the poorest countries of the world, and it's grievously dependent on IMF doleouts and assistance that it receives from Portugal and other West European countries. So it'll be the military regime would have to countenance sanctions being imposed, and would have to persuade IMF and other donors that their policies towards them would continue as it was during President Omaru's times. Thank you.
thank you, Ambassador, for highlighting all the regional implications and also how it has been happening in that area. Is there anything that international players can do? As you rightfully mentioned, that ECOWAS and AU has not been efficient in stopping such a coup.
Well, they have been efficient in condemning it, but Guinea-Bissau is one of the smallest countries in ECOWAS. It has only 2 million population, and it should not be too difficult for a military expedition to be launched by ECOWAS, which is led by Nigeria, a country of 220 million people, 100 times larger. To do so, but there seemed to be very little stomach in ECOWAS to do these kind of things anymore. So let's.
Great. With that, I would like to thank Ambassador Mahi Sajde for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, we stay in this news. The European Union has called for a swift return to constitutional order in Guinea-Bissau and the resumption of the interrupted electoral process following a military coup. The EU has urged that the vote count halted just before finalization be allowed to proceed as planned. Simultaneously, the Economic Community of West African States suspended Guinea-Bissau from all of its decision-making bodies in response. The coup, ECOWAS has condemned the military takeover and called on coup leaders to allow the National Election Commission to declare the results of the disputed presidential election. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, European Parliament has also condemned, but can they effectively do something other than condemning? Like you rightfully mentioned in our previous discussion, ECOWAS and AU has also done so. And how can Guinea-Bissau rebuild public trust in governance now?
I think the military coup leaders would place far more emphasis on getting their domestic house in order. Obviously need assistance from external donors, but they believe they can, they have the staying power, apparently, to gain their confidence. For the moment, they would have to contend with those aspirations at the domestic popular level for democracy. And we would have to see whether a wave of repression, strikes, and protests would follow. European Union has a long-standing policy of going by the former colonial masters' views. So what European Union would do would be guided by former colonial master Portugal in this respect. And I believe Portugal has no horses to back in this race because Portugal's own economy is not in good shape. Thank you.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Sudan, the European Parliament has approved a resolution that calls for an end to the civil war in Sudan, but without any mention of the United Arab Emirates' alleged role in the conflict. According to parliamentary sources, the European People's Party has pushed to remove any reference to the UAE after lobbying by Emirati Minister of State Lana Nusseibe, who was in Strasbourg when MPs held their plenary session this week. A leaked report by UN experts published in April 2025 claimed that sophisticated weapons were smuggled via the UAE and Chad into Darfur in a breach of an UN arms embargo. However, the United Arab Emirates has rejected these claims of providing any form of support to either warring parties since the onset of the civil war and condemns atrocities committed by both Port Sudan Authority and RSF as well. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for staying with us. Now, what are the implications for EU's credibility and international accountability when alleged foreign involvement in conflicts, such as the UAE's role in Sudan, is omitted from official resolution? Why do you think they have avoided mentioning UAE in particular?
Well, I think it's quite obvious that the UAE's lobbying efforts have paid off. At this stage, it is the Sudan Armed Forces government in Khartoum that has repeatedly alleged that UAE is in league with the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, which are fighting the SAF. And the UAE has been supplying them with weapons, with logistical support, and with unacknowledged hardware and economic ties. eastern part is with the SAF, while the western part, including Darfur region and Kordofan region in the south, is with the RSF. And here I should add that UAE has never acknowledged that it has been helping RSF militarily, although sufficient circumstantial evidence suggests that this is being done either directly or through intermediaries in Chad, eastern Libya, and South Sudan.
And how should
RSF has also denied it.
Yes.
So now, European Union Parliament has felt compelled to issue a statement asking for ceasefire and peaceful conditions and stability to return to Sudan, but it has not condemned the UAE, thanks to lobbying by the UAE minister. A direct reference to UAE asking it to stop arming RSF, etc., would have unnecessarily vitiated the atmospherics between Abu Dhabi and Strasbourg or Brussels. And I think the very profitable ties between UAE, which is an economic power to contend with, for Europe, which needs investments, which needs all sort of oil-related relationship with the UAE, now that the Russian oil and gas has been denied during the Ukraine war, would not have been conducive to its overall interests. So the European parliamentarians have erred to the side of UAE and have avoided such a condemnation or urge to stop arming RSF being made. I think if it was to happen, it would be the first time that a parliament or a government would have, apart from Sudan, would have officially pointed fingers at the UAE, which would have reacted a bit vociferously to that kind of accusation. Thank you.
With that, I would like to thank Ambassador Mahi Sachdev for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. Moving on, Rwandan President Paul Kagame accuses the Democratic Republic of Congo of delaying the signing of a Washington-brokered peace deal intended to end decades of conflict in eastern DRC. Speaking at a press conference, Kagame says DRC has introduced new conditions that were never part of the agreement reached in Washington, claiming these changes are the reason for the holdup. The eastern region has faced 30 years of violence, which escalated in January when the Rwandan-backed M23 rebel group seized major cities, including Goma and Bukavu. The DRC and Rwanda agreed to a peace framework in June, followed by a declaration of principles with M23 for a permanent ceasefire in July. Despite these steps, fighting continues with each side blaming the other. The DRC has indicated a possible December 4th signing in Washington, but DRC says he is unsure the meeting will occur, though both nations recently pledged to intensify efforts to implement the agreement. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Gautam Mukherjee. He's a senior journalist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Mr. Gautam Mukherjee, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, what role should external mediators, such as the United States, play when one party to a peace agreement, like the DRC in this case, is perceived to be introducing new conditions?
Yeah, well, it's jockeying for advantage, leverage. If you stick to the conditions, then in the negotiations, you're likely to be whittled down, whichever side is too willing to sign on the dotted line ends up the loser. So instead, they conquer some more territory and use it as a bargaining chip. There are a lot of resources at stake here, which is why the fight is taking place. And in all probability, there are actors behind both the Congo and Rwanda and the rebels who are interested parties in the outcome and with an eye on the resources of this highly resource-rich area that has been in conflict for decades. This is, I think, 30, 40 years of conflict. It's fairly typical of conflicts in Africa, which is indeed very resource rich, and where the foreigners, particularly from Europe, have made hay all the while at the expense of the locals. But again, there are a few, or a group of locals who are allied with foreign interested parties who also supply the money and the guns and the training. So it goes on. That's why, again, with an eye on the resources, you have Washington getting involved, trying to broker a deal, has ostensibly brokered it, even though it's not holding. And similarly, the Qataris in Doha. So this will go on until a settlement behind the scenes, maybe, not at the negotiating table, but people from both the sides will talk behind the scenes and hammer out a settlement, which will then come to the table. Meanwhile, they'll fight, as is going on. More
Right.
bloodshed.
Yes, as you've already mentioned, but this prolonged conflicts like this 3-decade violence in Eastern DRC, how do you think this long violence is shaping the negotiation strategies? Do you think they have learned something from this 3-decade-old conflict and the domestic pressure on national leaders when attempting to finalize and hold this peace deal?
Well, I don't think it's really up to the leaders who want to sign. It is an inability to deal with all the vested interests that are behind these people and behind the conflict. Over the 3 decades, it hasn't been the same actors. There have been a number of different people squabbling, fighting, killing, some of it and egging on different tribal groups. But at the center of it all are the resources. So this particular fight that is attempting to be settled has different players from the ones that went before. But the area is such that it has been in conflict now for decades.
So what do you think, to what extent does the United States and Europe, as you've mentioned, this is a resource-rich area with a lot of foreign actors eyeing for resources. How do you think they should ensure, can they ensure peace in this region and maybe enforce this ceasefire to hold?
Well, back-channel diplomacy. Back-channel diplomacy makes it possible to slice up the pie to everybody's satisfaction. Some of the people who are in the way can be paid off. Some of the others who want to get involved now can be held to amounts of investment. Who will do what after the war stops? all that kind of thing. But it is important to hammer these things out without the public eye focused on you. So when they come to the table and it is a matter of publicity and the media and so on, by then they should have settled matters. So I think that's what will go on now. Because ostensibly they've met and they've come to an agreement. But this is not working out for the people who have been left out of the actual negotiations.
And lastly, you mentioned that, yes, back channels, diplomacy will be the key in this. How might this focus of external mediators on formal agreements, how do you think this is overlooking or inadvertently enables the interest of regional actors who are contributing to delays or non-compliance of this ceasefire?
Well, I think they will all be involved in the back channel. In the back channel, they're not subject to political pulls and pressures. This is done in secret in third countries. They designate people who are not ostensibly well known to be part of their group. They may even try to get people from third countries and fourth countries to act on their behalf. This sort of thing is done routinely in diplomacy in areas which are very fraught. It is happening right now between the United States, Ukraine, Russia, NATO allies. There's a lot of back channel that has to go into it so that everybody's interests are taken into account and a compromise is reached. Similar things will have to be done here.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Gautam Mukherjee for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now moving on to Tunisia, Tunisian President Kais Saied has strongly condemned the European Parliament resolution on human rights which called for the release of his government's critics. He has described the resolution as a blatant interference in Tunisia's internal affairs and rejected external pressure on how the country handles human rights issues. Saied has stressed that Tunisia is fully capable of managing its own policies and ensuring rights and freedoms within the country, and he has suggested that European countries can learn from Tunisia's approach. He has also warned that foreign interventions or resolutions should not dictate national decisions, emphasizing the sovereignty of the Tunisian state in matters related to governance and justice. Now we move on to our next news. A local election in Namibia is drawing global attention as Adolf Hitler Unona, a long-serving municipal councillor with a historically infamous name, seeks to retain his seat in the Ompunja constituency. Unona, a member of the SWAPO party, first gained international visibility in 2020 when his name made headlines worldwide. The 59-year-old leader, who prefers to be called simply Adolf, has held the position since 2004 and remains popular in the northern Oshana region. As voters head to the polls, Unona appears poised for another victory, continuing his two-decade political run despite the global spotlight on his name. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.